Hello, Mr. Hardy here, and in this video I would like to teach you about Act 1, Scene 6 of Macbeth by Shakespeare. As per usual, you need to be familiar with this scene. You could have read it, listened to it, watched it, or studied it in class before continuing with this video. Again, following the same pattern, I'll start by summarising the scene, looking at key characters, themes, context, quotes, and techniques, before leaving you with a couple of tasks you can do after the video. So, what happens in Act 1, Scene 6 of Macbeth? Well, it's a very short scene, and it serves the purpose of getting King Duncan into Macbeth's castle. So King Duncan, his two sons, Malcolm, who's the eldest, and Denalbain, who's younger, Banquo, Macduff, and a few other lords or thanes arrive. My text says it's Lennox, Ross, and Angus, and they all arrive at Macbeth's castle in Inverness. And King Duncan and Banquo compliment Macbeth's castle. King Duncan says, "This castle hath a pleasant seat." That means the castle is situated in a beautiful environment, maybe like the countryside. And he also says that the air is very sweet. Macbeth echoes these compliments, noticing that birds such as martlets have chosen Macbeth's castle to lay their eggs and raise their young. And he also notes that the air is very delicate, it's very beautiful in this part of Scotland. This links to the theme of appearance versus reality. Macbeth's castle appears beautiful and welcoming, but we know that some very dark and evil acts may take place there later, namely regicide, Macbeth killing King Duncan. Lady Macbeth arrives to greet King Duncan and welcomes him and his entourage into their castle, into Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's castle. There's an interesting note on gender roles here, because traditionally in this very masculine warrior culture, Macbeth, as the man of the house, should be there to greet his guests. But Lady Macbeth, remember, has been unsexed by the spirits, and she adopts this masculine role of greeting King Duncan and welcoming him into her abode. King Duncan is delighted to see Lady Macbeth, and he confesses that he loves both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth and will continue his good graces towards them. He will continue to lavish them with wealth and opportunity and praise. Lady Macbeth reveals it's an honour to host a king and will do everything to provide a good service. So she says she will do 4 times more than what is necessary to please King Duncan. So, for example, if King Duncan asked for a goblet of wine, she would provide 4 goblets of wine. She's going to go above and beyond to be a really good host. Again, the audience knows more than the characters here, and we call this dramatic irony. So when King Duncan says that Macbeth's castle is pleasant, the audience knows that Macbeth plans to kill him there. And when Lady Macbeth says that I'm going to be a good host and do everything I can to make King Duncan happy, the audience has more knowledge than King Duncan and knows that Lady Macbeth isn't going to do this. She's going to do the opposite and encourage her husband to kill King Duncan. And we call this technique dramatic irony, when the audience knows more than the characters on stage. And Shakespeare would have used this technique as it would have really engaged the audience with his performance, as the audience would be thinking, "No, King Duncan, don't trust her, don't listen to her, you're in danger." It would have created a level of interaction between the audience and the action on stage. King Duncan then says, "Where is Macbeth? I want to go meet him." And Lady Macbeth leads the group, King Duncan's entourage, into the castle to go and meet Macbeth. And that is it. Very practically speaking, in Act 1, Scene 6, King Duncan arrives at Macbeth's castle. So who are our key characters? Well, we have King Duncan, so we see him again. And I reckon in this scene he comes across as fairly naive. He's quite a bad judge of character. You'll remember that when the Norwegians invaded Scotland, they were assisted by the traitorous Thane of Cawdor and by the traitor MacDonald. So King Duncan in his past has trusted lords who have gone on to betray him. And now King Duncan is trusting Macbeth and Lady Macbeth with his life by staying in their castle. And As we know, they plan to betray his trust again. Banquo again is presented as naive and unsuspecting. He was there with Macbeth when the witches gave him the prophecies, yet he doesn't expect his friend, his brother-in-arms, to do anything untoward, anything evil towards him. The king's sons, Malcolm and Alblain, are there, but we don't really learn much about them, as they don't say or do anything significant in this scene. The same is true of the other lords, like Lennox, Ross, Angus and Macduff. They're present, but they don't say anything or do anything particularly noteworthy. Lady Macbeth is last on the scene, and she is very noteworthy. First of all, she defies gender expectations, and she takes on the male role of welcoming the guest into her home. And she comes across as really evil because she's willing to lie directly to King Duncan's face. She's willing to say, I'm going to be the best host possible. Everything you ask, I'm going to do it 4 times better. Whilst all the while, she knows, and the audience knows through dramatic irony, that she plans on having King Duncan killed by her husband Macbeth. Remember, she's asked the spirits to fill her with direst cruelty. And this, to me, seems like a very cruel thing to do. She also lies directly to King Duncan's face, which shows she has no remorse. She has no sense of guilt. I don't know about you, but if I do something wrong to someone, or if I'm about to do something wrong to someone, I could barely look them in the eye. I'd be feeling very guilty. But Lady Macbeth has none of this. If you remember, she asked the spirits to make her blood thick in order to stop the passage of remorse. So here she's able to lie and plant and plot evil deeds, whilst at the same time appearing very gentle and innocent and friendly. And if you remember the advice she gave her husband, Macbeth, she said, look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent underneath it. This links to the theme of appearance versus reality. To King Duncan's face, she's appearing like a sweet innocent flower, the perfect female host, but underneath she plans on being a serpent and killing King Duncan, or at least having her husband commit the act of regicide. Okay, so what key themes can we explore in Act 1, Scene 6? The big theme here is appearance versus reality. According to King Duncan and Banquo, Macbeth's castle looks welcoming and peaceful and beautiful, but through dramatic irony, the audience knows it's not. The audience knows it's going to be King Duncan's deathbed. An evil, treasonous, sacrilegious crime is going to be committed here. Again, with the theme of appearance versus reality, Lady Macbeth appears welcoming. She appears to be the perfect host. But again, through the technique of dramatic irony, Shakespeare has informed us, the audience, that she is not going to be the perfect host. She plots that treasonous, sacrilegious act of regicide. Trust is a key theme in Macbeth as well. Who you trust is very important in order to lead a successful life. And it appears in this play that King Duncan has made some poor choices and misplaced his trust. Firstly, in the old traitorous Thane of Cawdor and in MacDonald, and now he appears to have misplaced his trust in Macbeth and Lady Macbeth by trusting his life to them, by being a guest under their roof, and ultimately they are plotting his downfall, his murder. Now, Shakespeare writes his plays to appeal to the monarch at the time, and the monarch at the time was King James I, and he was not particularly popular, and actually during his reign the gunpowder plot of 1605 occurred. I don't know if you're familiar with Remember the 5th of November, but this was when Guy Fawkes attempted to blow up Parliament to usurp power from the king. So King James I had real threats on his life, and he was paranoid and fearful about his life. So I think Shakespeare, through this play, Macbeth, is teaching not just the audience, but specifically King James I, the importance of trust and not misplacing your trust and trusting the right people. As a king, you need people around you who won't betray you, who won't commit treason and sacrilege, people you can trust. Speaking of context, you can of course bring in knowledge of the gunpowder plot into your GCSE essay if necessary, but I also want to go back to this warrior culture I touched upon in an earlier video. Quick reminder, warrior culture in 11th century Alba, Scotland, it was a very fragmented society with Picts and Britons and invading Norwegians. So it was very tribal, and in order to survive, you needed to be able to fight and kill to protect your tribe and to protect your king and your god, who has put your king in charge of you. So killing in the name of your king and god is acceptable. Another part of warrior culture is the very clear gender roles. It was a patriarchal society, so that means that men had a lot of the leadership and ruling of the society. So they would do the killing, they would do the political leadership roles such as king and thane, and women were more resigned to domestic roles such as being a wife and being a mother. But another key part of the warrior culture is this idea of hosting, and this was taken very seriously. If you are the host, you are expected to cater for your guests' needs. That could be providing them with food, with drink, with shelter, with warmth. You are expected to do it free of charge. That is part of your duty as a host. And you are expected to protect your guests with your life if necessary. So if bandits or robbers or another tribe attacked, it was your duty to not just protect yourself and your family, but also protect your guests, even if it meant you died for them. So Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, being hosts, planning to kill one of their guests would have been shocking, and it would have gone against the warrior culture at the time. But not only that, they were planning to betray a royal guest, a king, commit regicide, commit that treasonous and sacrilegious act. To the audience, that would have been very, very shocking. And remember, when we talk about the effect of Macbeth, we have to refer to an audience, not a reader, because these plays were designed to be performed and not just read. Okay, so what key quotes do we have from Act 1, Scene 6? Well, Duncan comments at the beginning of the scene, "This castle hath a pleasant seat." This means that Macbeth's castle in Inverness is set in a pleasant location. This links to the theme of appearance versus reality. He sees it as a beautiful castle, but he doesn't see that beneath the surface there's quite an evil intention, an evil action that will happen in this castle. Banquo also compliments Macbeth's castle. The air is delicate. This is a nice place to be. Again, Banquo is unable to get past the appearance, which looks good, and see the reality, which is Macbeth is willing to play foully in order to make that third prophecy of him becoming King of Scotland come true. And Banquo doesn't realise that he is in immediate danger by being in Macbeth's castle. King Duncan, when he greets Lady Macbeth, calls her honoured hostess. This is a great title to bestow upon someone, honouring them. You could maybe argue there's even a bit of alliteration here, honoured hostess. Basically, King Duncan really values and loves Lady Macbeth. In those first three quotes, if you're looking for a technique to point out, I would look at these adjectives. Pleasant seat, the adjective pleasant. The air is delicate, the adjective of delicate. And honoured hostess, giving honour to Lady Macbeth. I'd say adjectives are your key words you would zoom in on there. The fourth and final quote is Lady Macbeth talking to King Duncan and explaining how she's going to behave as a host. In every point, twice done and then done doubled. So 2 times 2 is 4. So she's saying that anything you ask for, King Duncan, I will do 4 times as much, and I do it out of love and honour for you. This will link to the theme of appearance versus reality. She wants to appear like that innocent flower, but really, through dramatic irony, the audience knows that she is very much the poisonous serpent underneath it. And King Duncan has misplaced his trust again, it would seem. Okay, so what can you do to solidify your knowledge? I would recommend making notes from this video on a physical copy of the play. I would then attempt to answer the question, how does Shakespeare present King Duncan in Act 1 of Macbeth? So by this stage, we've seen King Duncan a couple of times and we've heard of him through other characters. He is largely presented as a good king. And remember, Shakespeare would have done that to curry favour with King James I. So he wants to present King Duncan in a good light. He gives Macbeth a promotion. He treats to Thane of Cawdor. He treats everyone fairly. He was able to, through Macbeth's help, fend off the Norwegians and protect his people. So he's largely a good, ethical king. However, he does seem to have a weakness, and that is misplaced trust, the theme of trust. He trusted the old Thane of Cawdor, he trusted MacDonald, now he trusts Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. I think that trust is going to be King Duncan's undoing. So how is King Duncan presented? I would probably write one paragraph saying how he's presented as a good king, with quotes, techniques and evidence, and explanations. And then I would do another paragraph about how Shakespeare has presented him as a king with misplaced trust, as having some kind of weakness that would ultimately undo him. And if you want extra points, you would talk about the contextual knowledge of King James I, maybe the Gunpowder Plot, and how Shakespeare was warning the real-life monarch that it's very important to consider who you trust. Okie dokie. If you found this video useful for your Macbeth revision, please give it a like. Please also subscribe to my Mr. Hardy YouTube channel. And if you think there's any key quotes or information I've left out, please feel free to leave a comment. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you on the next one.